Hey everyone, today I wanted to share with you a scary experience I had while hitchhiking a few years ago. As a young and adventurous backpacker, I was always looking for ways to explore new places and meet interesting people. And when I found myself backpacking through Montana, I knew that hitchhiking was a great way to do just that. I had heard from other travelers that hitchhiking was a common and safe way to get around in the area, and I was excited to give it a try. Plus, as a budget-conscious traveler, hitchhiking was a great way to save money on transportation costs. So, on a beautiful day in Montana, I found myself standing on the side of the road with my backpack and thumb out, waiting for a ride. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as I watched cars go by, wondering who would be the one to pick me up. But before long, a friendly-looking driver in a beat-up pickup truck pulled over and offered me a ride. He was a local farmer who was on his way to the same town I was heading to, and we struck up a conversation about life in Montana and the beautiful scenery around us. As we drove through the winding roads and mountain passes, I felt a sense of exhilaration and freedom that only comes with hitchhiking. I was seeing parts of Montana that I never would have seen if I had taken a bus or rented a car, and I was meeting people who I never would have met otherwise. In that moment, I felt like I was truly living my best life as a backpacker. And little did I know, that ride would soon turn into a nightmare that I would never forget. As we continued driving, the friendly and chatty demeanor of my driver started to shift. He began asking me more personal questions that made me feel uneasy, like if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever hitchhiked before, and if I was afraid of being alone with a stranger. At first, I tried to brush off his questions and change the subject. But as the questions continued and became more invasive, I started to feel a growing sense of fear and unease. Finally, I mustered up the courage to ask him to drop me off at the next gas station, telling him that I needed to use the restroom and stretch my legs. But to my horror, he refused. Instead, he told me that he wanted to show me something that he thought I would like, and that I shouldn't worry because it was just a short detour from our original route. But something in his tone and the look in his eyes made me feel like there was something very wrong about this situation. As we continued to drive further away from the main road and deeper into the mountains, my fear grew. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that I was completely at the mercy of this stranger. That's when I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to get out of this situation alive. As we drove further and further away from the main road, I knew that I had to get out of the car as soon as possible. But when I tried to open the door, I realized with a sinking feeling that it was locked from the outside. I was trapped in the car with a stranger who had bad intentions. Panic set in as I frantically searched for a way to escape. My heart racing and my hands shaking, I tried to unlock the doors from the inside, but to no avail. I was completely helpless, with no control over my fate. That's when I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I started to scream and kick the windows, hoping that someone passing by would hear me and come to my rescue. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I pounded my fists against the glass, hoping against hope that someone would see me. But as time went on and we drove deeper into the mountains, it became clear that no one was coming to save me. My screams echoed off the mountainside, but there was no one around to hear them. Finally, I saw my chance. We came to a stop at a red light, and I knew that this was my moment to make a break for it. With all the strength I could muster, I threw myself against the door and managed to get it open. I bolted out of the car and ran as fast as I could, not looking back until I was sure I was safe. Looking back on that experience now, I realize how lucky I was to make it out alive. It's a sobering reminder of the dangers of hitchhiking and traveling alone, and it's something that I will never forget. In the end, I was lucky to have made it out of that situation unharmed. But it's an experience that has stayed with me for years and has made me think twice about the risks of hitchhiking and traveling alone. So, to anyone who's thinking of hitchhiking or traveling alone, I want to offer a word of caution. While it can be a great way to see the world and meet new people, it can also be dangerous, especially for women and other vulnerable groups. Always trust your instincts and listen to your gut. If something doesn't feel right, don't ignore it. It's better to be safe than sorry. And if you do decide to hitchhike or travel alone, make sure you take precautions to stay safe, like letting someone know your itinerary, carrying a charged phone with you at all times, and avoiding isolated or unsafe areas. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope that it serves as a reminder to always stay vigilant and stay safe when traveling. Hitchhiking can be a dangerous game, especially when you're alone and in unfamiliar territory. Our guest today is going to tell us about his harrowing experience hitchhiking in Idaho. Please welcome Jenny.
Thanks for having me on. I'd like to start by saying that what happened to me should be a lesson to anyone who's thinking about hitchhiking. I know I learned my lesson the hard way.
Can you tell us about what happened?
Yeah, so I was hitchhiking through Idaho last summer, trying to get to a friend's place. It was getting late, and I hadn't had any luck getting a ride for a while. Then this truck pulled up, and the guy inside offered me a ride. I was relieved, but also a little wary. He seemed friendly enough at first, but then he started asking me weird questions. Like where I was going and if I had any money on me. I tried to play it cool and be polite, but I was getting really scared. I didn't want to anger him or make him think I was hiding something, so I tried to answer his questions truthfully, without giving away too much information. However, as the ride went on, his questions became more and more personal and invasive. He asked me where I was from, what I did for a living, and if I had any family in the area. I tried to deflect the questions and steer the conversation towards safer topics, but he was persistent. I started to feel a knot in my stomach, like something wasn't right. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew I was in a dangerous situation. I started to mentally plan what I would do if things went south. I considered jumping out of the truck while it was moving, but I didn't want to risk injuring myself further. As the driver continued to ask me questions, I noticed his eyes darting back and forth between the road and me. I couldn't help but wonder if he was planning something sinister. My heart was pounding, and I was trying to come up with a plan to get out of the situation as quickly and safely as possible. Eventually, the driver's demeanor changed, and I knew I was in serious trouble. He started driving erratically and began to speed up, weaving in and out of lanes. My heart was racing, and I could feel my palms sweating. Then, he pulled out a knife and held it to my throat. In that moment, I thought I was going to die. I was terrified and could feel my whole body shaking. I couldn't believe that this was happening to me. I tried to remain calm, but I was completely helpless. The driver demanded that I hand over all of my money and valuables, but I didn't have much to give. He got angry and started yelling at me, waving the knife around. I thought it was the end for me. Looking back on it now, I realize how lucky I am to be alive. It was a truly terrifying experience, and I would never want anyone else to go through something like that. It taught me a valuable lesson about the dangers of hitchhiking and trusting strangers, and I will never forget what happened to me.
That's horrifying. What did you do after that?
I went to the hospital, of course. And then I reported the incident to the police. They never found the guy who did it, but I hope they catch him someday.
What advice would you give to anyone who's thinking about hitchhiking?
Don't do it. Just don't. It's not worth the risk. If you need to get somewhere, there are other ways to do it. Take a bus, or a train, or just walk. But don't put your life in the hands of strangers.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. It's a reminder that we need to be cautious and aware of our surroundings, especially when we're on the road.